And welcome back to Bars Loaded Podcast with Ben and Nick.
We have a very special guest joining us today. And when Nick and I first started speaking about bringing guests on, I agreed under one condition, and that condition was that our first guest would be the man joining us today. Obviously, Nick and I are both massive fans of yours. And I kind of just want to be able to take a moment to sort of express my gratitude for the impact that you've had on me as a coach. Like, we've known each other a long time now, and you've really shaped me and my philosophies and my approaches in ways that I could probably never really express. So I just want to take this moment to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything you've done. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Jordan Shallow, aka the Muscle Doc.
I appreciate that. The problem was you were just a dog shit coach when I met you. That's all you said there. You were just, that's all that meant. It was just like, oh man, I was proper shit. Well, I guess we all were proper shit. God, fucking 7, almost 8 years ago now.
Yeah, man, it's a while back.
Yeah, dude, it's been a minute. We're old.
You know, it was funny. Like, me listening to you at South Melbourne was probably the first time I realized I was probably a little bit autistic.
Really?
That was the first time? Well, I mean, in the coaching space.
No one told you before? Wow, you need better friends.
I've actually, funny story, I've only just recently figured that out for myself, and I'm 38.
Better late than never. They call it a spectrum for a reason, right?
That's it.
It was a really funny moment. I was sitting in the gym and I looked at my wife and I said, "Do you think I'm a little bit autistic?" And she was like, "I think it's probably more than a little bit."
Yeah, she's been sitting on that one for a while. She didn't know how to double dutch her way into that conversation. Glad he brought that up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was a fun day. That was last week.
Oh, big. Happy to be a part of history.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So,
do you want to maybe just give our listeners a bit of a rundown on obviously like who you are, what you do, and kind of how you got started in all of this?
I can try. I'll try and give the Australian powerlifting version of it. Okay, so what happened? Jesus. I started my academic career in history and political science. Quickly realized by the number of people wearing berets to my lectures that these people were not for me. 2 years in, switched majors to kinesiology, and then had my sort of sights set on chiropractic college. Moved from Toronto to California for grad school. Finished up chiropractic college in like the San Francisco Bay Area. My first job out of school was as a chiropractor at Apple's world headquarters in Cupertino, California. Opened my first private practice simultaneously at Boss Barbell Club, which if you guys are, the Bar is Loaded podcast, you guys would probably be familiar with that. So Dan Green was one of my first patients. I opened up a clinic inside his gym. Simultaneously opened up another practice in the Combat Sports Academy with Jesse Burdick, who runs the powerlifting part of CSA and the Power Wad, and was a West Side guy back in the day. Probably does probably some of the best conjugate for raw lifting training in the world, in my opinion. Runs great meets, and then simultaneously became a strength coach at Stanford University, and then simultaneously started a podcast and a business that I both currently still run today. And then as you can imagine, something had to give, and it gave. I ended up a few years into running that mad cycle of just going to different offices and having 5 or 6 different jobs, and then ended up living out of my Toyota 4Runner for a brief period of time, and was doing some seminars just to pay for my powerlifting escapades. I'm not going to say it competitions, but I would go over to Australia where Ben and I first met, and people were generous enough to host me for 3-4 hours so I could talk about lifting weights and then go lift some weights the next day at a comp. And at the time when I was living in my car, I was doing maybe 2 domestic seminars a month. And I thought, well, I could probably just fill this up and get like a few months back to back to back. So I could just leave California. I couldn't afford to live there. So I just sold what I couldn't, sold what I could, threw out what I couldn't. And then I took off for 3 months of sort of consecutive seminars with some solo, some corporate, some partnerships with some people I was doing some stuff with at the time. And I was like, well, I'll just go home with my tail tucked between my legs after those 3 months. And after the first weekend on the road, I got a call. It was actually John Meadows, rest in peace. And then it was like, when are you available next? And well, not for another 3 months and a week. And it's great. Come on by to Columbus, Ohio. And then the next weekend, 2 more calls. And the weekend after that, I had 3 more calls. And then next thing you know, I was on the road for the better part of 3.5 to 4 years, just sort of bouncing around, and then found myself still running the education company. Obviously, the education company expanded with me traveling on the road. That kind of became the main thing. Got roped into pro sports, football, primarily American gridiron football. Ended up, back in the day, worked with a few kids in college who ended up in the league, started working with them in the off season, got mixed up in the strength and conditioning world, NFL off season, NFL combine, started working post-op rehabilitation with some guys in the league. As I was kind of traveling around, I'd fly in, I would see them, and then word kind of spread, and then had a few steadier big name clients in the NFL, which at the time I ended up moving to, I was in Toronto briefly, and sorry, this is actually the short version, unfortunately. And then I moved from Toronto, where I was living briefly at the beginning of the pandemic, and then I moved to Dubai, and then I moved to Miami for a client, stayed there, worked with that client for a bit, and then got involved in a more formalized professional athlete training program, again, primarily NFL. Although the Australian version intersects quite nicely around this time last year. Worked with the Australian tennis player Nick Kyrgios for 6 months or so. Went over to Canberra, met with him, went on the road with him, lived with him, traveled with him, trained him, treated him, ate dinner with him, did a bunch of shit I probably can't say on the podcast with him. And then now my day-to-day is I run with my 2 founders of Pre-Script, a continuing education company in the health and fitness space. I do a lot on the athlete management side. I do a lot on the pro sport team consulting side. Run the podcast, do some seminars and some speaking, and then, I don't know. I just talk about lifting weights. I just do it like a bunch of different ways.
So, dude, what a journey!
I don't like to do that very often. It stresses me. I'm sweating, actually.
I can imagine there wasn't many breaths taken in that sentence, but honestly, I don't know how I didn't know until yesterday that you spent time living in your car. But I mean, I've listened to hours and hours and hours and hours of you speak, and that was one podcast. But I literally have no idea how I have never heard you say that before until yesterday on the lecture. Shout out to you. I actually lived in my car for 3 years in the Bay Area as well, Fairfield, California, from 2011 to 2013. And I had a decision to make where I could either pay rent or pay my powerlifting gym membership and compete in powerlifting in the Bay Area. And I chose powerlifting. So, did a few meets there in 2011, living out of a Ford Taurus, which is the American version of a Falcon. I had to sleep in the boot. I'm not sure if you're too familiar with Fairfield, California, but it's not the safest area. And running the 24-hour fitness there, so I would go into the work, I'd work the day, I'd go out, I'd sleep in the boot of the car in the car park, and then go back to work the next morning and use the gym facilities to shower in, and then go to training. And crazy. So I know for me personally, going through that experience kind of really shaped my outlook on what hard work is and what sacrifice is, and really like what the worst thing could happen is if everything goes to shit. It's like not much can be worse than that. So like, fuck it, you may as well just have a shot. Like, what about you? How do you feel like that experience kind of shaped everything that has come following that?
I think it's instilled a heightened sense of urgency. I think that was probably the big, everything you said. Yes, absolutely. But I think what I still carry with me is a sense of urgency. Like, if an email can get sent before I go to bed, it gets sent before I go to bed. It does nothing wait till tomorrow, right? Like, and I think, with what I've, all the random shit I've been able to do is as a direct byproduct of that ethos played out with every decision. It's like, move fast is like, that's definitely something that I carry quite close to my heart. And it's like, the urgency, and there's such a sense of complacency, and there's a lot of talk, and I don't like leading off about like what other people do, but something that maybe I'll make it personal. A lot of people will come to me. I had this barista I got to know, this dude down the street that makes my coffee in the morning, and he's like, he kind of stays up to speed. Oh, I haven't seen you in a while. Where are you? Oh, I was traveling here, when on the road next. I'm going tomorrow, back. I'm not really sure. And he kind of asked me like, when are you going to slow down? And I was like, mate, when I'm getting carried by 6 of my friends. Like, what kind of stupid question is that? Right? Like, so I think urgency without a doubt, because I thought I knew what urgency was. Graduated grad school, California, a decent amount of student debt. That's putting it lightly. And I was like, oh, okay, now's the time to work. And it's just like, oh no, like there's levels that you don't know that you have access to until you're like, hey, it'd be cool to not have to, wake up to some guy's flashlight knocking on your door saying, hey, you can't fucking sleep here. Like, oh, okay, that really puts things in perspective for you. So, and there's a lot of people out there who find that urgency without, finding rock bottom, and hey, fucking kudos to you, man. Like, I get PTSD if I see an early model, 2000s 4Runner on the road. I just start fucking sweating. But yeah, I mean, that was for me, and I still carry that with me. Is that it's definitely a sense of urgency that's like, hey, time is of the essence, and if you can start moving quickly, then I think a lot of people get crippled by inaction. It's easy to make excuses to not do stuff, but I remember, it's funny you talk about the powerlifting gym and like paying rent. I remember this is some meathead math, and we knew this would be a shit show. I remember doing the math and like rough calorie estimates at the time. My heaviest off-season weight was 293 pounds. So like 135 kilos, maybe, give or take. And I remember doing the math of like, okay, if I drive to the grocery store, I need to get gas, which means I only have X dollars left for groceries, but I can only get less. If I walk, I have more, but the amount of groceries I would get with my more money will require 2 trips. But then I will burn more calories walking as a 290-pound man in the California heat from my car to the store and back. Where am I in a net surplus? Like a greater net surplus? Do I drive and get gas, or do I walk twice round trip and get my groceries that way? So it's like, yeah, and that stuff like that, I think, stays with you. And for me, it's just a matter of like, time to move. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, when we were setting this up, I literally said that to Em, my wife. I said, I sent you a message, you responded straight away. You said, send me an email, you responded straight away. I was like, dude, I like how fast this guy moves.
No time to waste, man. We'll be dead tomorrow. One day that'll be true. So it's like, we might as well get going while the going's good.
Yeah. I love that math though. I should say I did similar math. I did actually have a house that I lived at with roommates, but I chose to live in the car because I couldn't pay rent on time if I bought groceries, and groceries were more important because I needed to be jacked. So I'd buy groceries, not go home all week, and then I would either have to float a check for gas to drive home or float a check for more groceries, and I just chose groceries.
Wins every time.
Yeah. Jacked over being comfortable.
Well, yeah, being jacked is uncomfortable. You're 293 pounds. You've made your decision. You've made your bed in the boot. Sleep in it.
Yeah, I was about 293 at the time as well. I competed in the 308s.
I like to think that the world is cyclical, that there's some 290-pound man in his truck right now somewhere in the Bay Area that's going to tell this story in like 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be great.
If we kind of obviously like remove Jordan from like business and remove that sort of sense of urgency, is there anything else that really drives you as a human?
That's a good question. I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, I don't know, probably no more than anyone else, really. It's all just pushing rocks up hills. I think, we know who the thoroughbreds are, and it's no one on this call. We're all just plow horses, right? So it's just like, I don't know, strap something to me, and I guess I'll just start walking. I don't know. Like, I think, okay, maybe where I grew up is probably a big part of that. like where I grew up, like you were toe tagged to be working on an assembly line in one of a major car manufacturing plant or a subsidiary plant. Like hard work, honest wage, you made good money, but you were quite literally a cog in the machine from 7:36 a.m. to 7:36 p.m. And they made it 7:36. I don't think it's a way to fuck with you, to like tell you to quite literally that they own you. Like, and I was like, I was kind of okay with that. I had, history and political science in my sights, but at the end of the day, I was like, I'm probably just going to sell some coke, sell some gear, make a little extra money on the side, get a nice pickup truck, put a boat in the river like everyone else. And like you grow up around people that are like super tough and blue collar, and like blue collar, like they actually do. Blue collar to me is doing work that you don't like, right? Everyone's like, and not to be disparaging, but like there's no blue collar fitness. Like I don't care how big your parachute pants are or like where in New Jersey you work out. It's like, and it's funny because I have a friend who that's his brand, and I feel bad, but like I go work hard. Like I find the fitness industry is very like they're hard work culture vultures. And it's like, guys, what are we doing here? Like, we got the whole 4K set up, and like this is not. At no point did any of us tack weld our two fingers together today. Like, that's not. This is it's an impossible. So for me, it's a matter of like, oh fuck, like most of my friends are back still, just doing what they need to do for their family or whatever, and there's that to me is like, oh, okay, I had a choice and I made a choice and I get to make a choice every day. And that's probably it. It's like, I grew up around like tough motherfuckers that work really, really hard at shit they don't like to do. It's like, at the very least, you owe it to them to like work really hard at the thing you like to do. Like, I kind of, in my eyes, like I got out, and not everyone gets out. And so, yeah, it's a good reminder. Like whenever I'm home, it's like, dude, like this couple of bad decisions and this could have easily been you. So like, do everyone a solid that is still, slinging tin in some tool and die factory. Like have a solid crack at this. Like don't sit back and live off the interest, like see what you could do. So I would say that's probably the biggest influence for me is like how I grew up and like where I grew up and the people I grew up around.
Nice. Yeah, that's really good. I hear you talk about, is it Windsor?
Shout out.
Yeah. Is it? It's pretty rough.
Yeah. It's just the other side of the border of Detroit, Michigan. So like think 8 Mile.
Okay. Yeah.
That. Like, yeah, it's
okay.
It's colorful to say the least.
And did you grow up playing hockey there?
Yeah. I played hockey. Pretty much I could skate before I could walk, I think. And then I played right up until I moved to California.
Nice. I've been on a little bit of a Sending Ben hockey reels rampage recently. It's a sport that I'm really getting into. I grew up playing rugby league, and then when I was over in the States, I was a massive Seahawks fan. Gridiron was kind of my thing. But I feel like those sports are kind of getting a little bit softer and softer as years go on, whereas hockey doesn't seem like it's going down that same route, and I love that.
Yeah, it's a sport of self-governance, which is nice. Like it's historically and for always and always will have that element of fighting. I mean, if you want, like lacrosse is also on that list. It's not as quick and maybe it's not as fast, but it's also more difficult to follow. But yeah, ice hockey it definitely has its characters, and it's not for the faint of heart. And it's always surprising because if you see like a big player in gridiron NFL, like they're proper big people. Like we host this thing where we bring coaches out and we bring them around like college and pro kids, and like most people think they've seen big people, but like there's this belt of humans that live around like the Florida, Georgia, Texas panhandle, and like it might as well be another country, or it might as well be another planet. Sorry, like you're dealing with kids that are 6'6" at a minimum, 350 at a minimum. And but like when you're around hockey players, when you see them without their equipment, and especially the tough guys, you're like, that's it. And it's like, yeah, that's it, man. That guy could fucking chuck him. So yeah, it is of the major sports in North America: baseball, basketball, football, and hockey. It's definitely the most, and I'm going to use the word a little loosely here, but the most blue collar. They don't get paid the most amount of money. They still get well compensated, but yeah, there's an air of like, fuck. I mean, to coin a phrase, fuck around and find out in hockey, which I like, because it actually, to me, it protects the skill of the game. It's not like the refs have to protect the skill of the game. It's the guy on the fourth line, that Matt Rempe kid from New York, who's like 6'7" and go fucking fight anyone. Like, that's what keeps the game skillful, right? Dude, he's got like the John Lennon flow and everything. He's a monster.
He's like rocking up to his fourth game in the league with 2 black eyes and his whole face is swollen, and he gets in another fight.
Yeah. God bless him, man. God bless him.
What a baller.
Just a born savage.
Yeah, I did have that experience. I lived in Seattle for a little while, and I'm 6'6", and I weighed about 300 or 280, 300 at the time. And I got in an elevator, and 3 or 4 O-linemen from UW jumped in at the same time, and I felt like the smallest human on the planet. And these were college kids, and I was a 28-year-old man.
Yeah, they have that effect, man. It's just, and it's you catch some of these kids out of the Polynesian countries, Tongans, Samoans, Hawaiians, like their joints are big, right? Like, you got a knee the size of a bowling ball. It's like, what the fuck am I going to do to this guy?
Just get pummeled. So you touched on the two businesses that you still kind of run today with your partners. I'm assuming that's Pre-Script and RX'd Radio, and I've been a big follower of those, and as has Ben for a long time. When you first started those two kind of adventures, I'll call them, that many years ago, is the current iteration of what they are now what you kind of guys had in mind? And walk us through that, because I feel like that would be a super interesting story.
Yeah, no, definitely. First, I was like, out the job, definitely not. Jay and I went to school together, met in school. We were like the two guys that couldn't really be fucked. Like, he was doing CrossFit at the time. I was getting into powerlifting. Like, we never missed a workout in all of grad school. Like, if it was just, we didn't care. Like, we didn't care. We straight up just didn't care. And then when we graduated, we were one of the handful of people who stayed. Most people were imports, like we were. He's from Pennsylvania. I'm from Canada. And it's the Bay Area. It's expensive.
He's not from California?
No, from Dallas, Pennsylvania, middle of nowhere, PA.
He's the most Californian person I think I've ever met. And I've never met him.
He'd probably attempt to punch you in the face. Now, there's a height discrepancy there, but he would get you by the knee, and he's a damn good wrestler. So, like, I would fuck with Jay. But no, so we both decided to stay. We had a good relationship. Obviously, as I mentioned, I had a relationship with Dan at Boss, and he had a relationship in the CrossFit gym that he represented at West Coast Regionals on an annual basis. Like, he was a hell of a barbell athlete. And we actually, truth be told, like, we weren't super close in school. Like, he ran with a different group. I ran with, and it was small. It was a small school. We were still, actually, there was one time in the second quarter where I got into it didn't end up being much of a fight, but I ended up getting into a fight with one of his close friends. And then there was like a clear divide of like who had whose back. And we're at this bar in downtown San Jose. And I was playing pool against one of his friends who's really, really drunk. And he spilled a beer on me. And then it was just like fucking dukes up. And so I'm kind of like going at it with this kid. And then it was really all the Canadian guys that were friends with me. So there's like 5 or 6 guys behind me going like, all right, well, I think he's got this. And then there was 5 or 6 guys behind this kid, Shane Fulton. I don't know what he's doing, and I remember looking, because I'm like, all right, if I finish this guy first, like, who's the problem? Like, who's in his group of people that I'm going to have to worry about? And I just remember seeing this little cauliflower-eared fuck. I'm like, that guy's going to be a nightmare if this goes south. And it was Jay, and we're fucking 13, 14, probably 14 years later, we're, best friends and business partners. But no, when we started, we'd both graduated. We become closer as, graduation became looming, as we both understood what we wanted to do. We wanted to work in the gym. And then what we started to do was just kind of bounce ideas off each other. Like, hey, what scheduling software do you use? Who did your website? I got this person taking pictures. Do you need me to send them your contact? And we started meeting up, and like, you just get kicked in the balls every month. You're just getting crushed financially. And so what I started doing the Instagram, actually we both started doing the Instagram thing back while we were still in school. And we would get questions based off the content we put out, like, I have knee pain or my shoulder hurts, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, what if we did something and like, because we both had this kind of idea of like, let's create like an exercise library that we could at least send our patients. And then quickly it evolved into like, well, let's just take this exercise library and sell it to everyone on the internet that we can. So we started off as like kind of an exercise programming platform for like rehabilitation, corrective exercise for athletes. That was a little bit more than just like, clamshell shit, TheraBand stuff. It was like, okay, how do you actually return to play under a bar? And so we had like a handful of products out of the gate, and it was like a super ragtag operation. It was just me and him. And then what had happened is I had a patient of mine who was the head of advanced robotics at Ames Research Center, so a NASA research center just down the road. Perks of being in the Silicon Valley, as you know. And he came in, he came to see me, and he had back pain for about a decade, wanted to get into powerlifting, a PhD from Carnegie Mellon. This guy, president, called him on 9/11 to bring his robots to ground zero, like American hero, great dude. And this guy, he's in my office, and I treat him. I'm like, I'm going to send you like this hyperlinked spreadsheet on Google Sheets of stuff I want you to try. So I sent it to him, and then I'm driving into the office next day, not even thinking anything about it. And I get a call, and it's this guy. And I was like, oh, hey, what's up, man? He goes, hey, are you in your office today? And I'm thinking like, oh, fuck, like this he's paralyzed, or I'm getting sued, like worst case scenario. I'm like, yeah, is everything okay? Like, you come on by if you need anything. And he's like, you're on your way in now? I was like, yeah. And sure enough, I got there. He was sitting outside my desk, and he's like, it's the first time in 15 years I woke up without back pain. Like, what is it that you like? What the fuck are these exercises? How come no one's done this before? Like, this has to be a business. And I was like, oh, like, yeah, it kind of is, as much as me and my buddy can like make it a business. And he's like, I want it. And I was like, oh yeah, sick, man. Like, cool. Okay. And so lo and behold, he had a friend of his who ran operations on a project that he did with DARPA, which like is this like kind of semi-secretive U.S. military operation, Department of Advanced Research project. And so like 2 months goes by, this lady flies in from Washington, and we're sitting down with the head of advanced robotics from NASA talking about like our stupid exercise programs. And we're like, okay, I guess. Like, so then we brought them on as partners, and it was kind of like, I don't want to say necessarily it was off to the races, but over time, what had happened was the content I was putting on Instagram was educational, and kind of in the back end, I just started writing a book one day. I remember where I was when I decided like, fuck this. Like, I don't know. I don't think anyone else does it the way I would do it. I don't say anyone else does it right, but like I would do it differently if I had. And I was like, well, shut the fuck up and stop bitching about it. Like, actually do something. And I remember opening up a Google Doc. I could probably pull up the master file and tell you what exact date it was. And I started writing this book, and then I got reached out to by this a major chain of gyms similar to the Good Life that you guys have, might actually be a little bit larger here in North America, ironically still called Good Life. And yeah, some guy like DM'd me and was like, hey, I like run the education for this company, for the personal training department of this commercial gym here in Canada. I'm very familiar with it. I worked there as a kid, actually, as a PT. And he's like, would you be interested in like putting some courses together? We kind of had like a straw poll of people in the industry that we'd like to come in and teach our staff. And you sort of rose up to the top of the list. And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And he's like, well, when can you get it done? And I was like, give me a few days. And he's like, okay, sure. But I had this book that was sort of acting like this thought process framework. And I was able to turn around 2 courses in a couple of days. And then all of a sudden we had like a shift in the primary core of the business. And because they kind of approached me and my Instagram account, and I was like, no, like I can't let this just be me, because then it'll die when I inevitably die young. And I'm like, I don't want that. So then I basically told my business partners at the time, like, hey, I'm going to take this on, and we're going to brand this under Pre-Script, which at the time was just doing, we were doing corrective exercise program and full scale, like powerlifting, hypertrophy style, and Olympic weightlifting programming. So we had like, I don't want to say 10 products maybe, but they were all in the digital training space. And then what we started doing was we started branding all of these in-person education events that I was doing as Pre-Script courses. And this is back in like 2017. And then another gym franchise reached out. Ultimate Performance is international. There's one location in Sydney. There's probably over 20 now across the world. So Nick Mitchell reached out to me, wonder if I could do the same thing for him. So I'd be going from Halifax, Nova Scotia to Singapore, to Surrey, Burnaby, British Columbia, to Sydney, to Hong Kong, to London, to Chelsea, to Mississauga, Ontario. So I was just kind of doing, and it was all under the brand of Pre-Script. And we had no supporting online curriculum. And then one day kind of hit me. I was in Hawaii, of all places, just kind of jumping through around the world to get from these fucking places. And I was like, well, I don't have an exclusivity to any of these. And some of it was just like, hey, I need you to make a course about this. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. Probably it's kind of a dumb thing to make a course about, but if you want me to do it, I'll fucking do it. And then I kind of had this idea. I was like, well, what if I were to put together like a greatest hits? Because I had a lot of people, because I would travel with a photographer with what little money we had whenever we could afford it, and to kind of tell the story that like I was out just teaching every weekend all over the world. And that's when I was on the road for 3.5, almost 4 years. And then it kind of created a bit of a vacuum where people were like, well, I'd be super interested in taking your courses. And my answer was always like, well, you have to get a job at these places. I'm like, that's a dumb answer from someone who was living in a car. Like, you fucking retarded. Like, what's wrong with you? And then I was like, oh, wait, what if I put together something that was, what I would think that people need to know? And then, September 2017, I put together the level 1 course without really knowing what it was. And ironically enough, like, it's actually very similar in structure to the one that's there today. So maybe I'm just too stubborn to change it. But yeah, that was sort of our first opening salvo into the digital education space. And then our curriculum was expanded from L1, L2, L3, and we brought in some great course providers, and I think we have like 11 or 12 courses now under the flag of Pre-Script. So but yeah, it started off as kind of like this way to better service our patients that we saw in our office, and then doing apparently a really good job for at least one of them. It kind of accelerated the business, and then just say yes and figure it out. It's kind of got us to where we're at now. And it's been almost 8.5 years, give or take.
That's incredible. Every single story that you've told today, it's like the common theme is just say yes, figure it out, and do a good job, and then more opportunities come.
That's pretty much all it is, man. Like it doesn't have to get much more sophisticated than that. I'm sure that ethos still finds me well. And I don't know, I'm not a business guru or anything like that, but it's been working.
Yeah. I love it.
It's a hell of a journey you've been on, man.
Again, I try not to do these too often. If it wasn't for you guys, I probably would have actually said no for the first time. But yeah, it's I don't know, man. I can't see it through any other set of eyes other than like the ones I've seen it through. And it's just like fear and urgency. That's all it is. Like none of it's premeditated. Like I'm not sitting back in a war room. It's a little bit more strategic now, but I understand and have been the benefactor of being in shit environments. So I'm really good at just jumping into shit environments. Like I leave tomorrow, my bag is half packed, and I don't know when I'm coming back. I mean, like I'll be back, but like I know I have to get to Tampa. I have to go to California tomorrow, and I know I have to get to Tampa Bay, but then I might have to go to Seattle, or I might have to go to New York, or I might come back, or I might have some combination. It's like, I think understanding how important the external environment is and always has been, it's like when you get quote unquote comfortable, it's like, all right, well, that's not going to shake anything up. What if I just fucking had an open-ended ticket to California? It's like, well, certainly something good's going to come of this, because something good will always come of it. So it continues to be that. Now it's just deliberate, because, we could run the company from these screens and these computers and these mics and all would be good, but we can't grow the company from here. So it's like, all right, one more onto the breach, good friends, and then I'm off to the fucking airport again. So yeah, it's the second it stops being that, I think it stops being, period.
If you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
That's tough. There's a handful that come to mind.
Yeah, let's go top 3 then.
Okay, so first would be Primo Levi. He's my author of a favorite book. He was a sort of a Holocaust survivor from this November 1941 to December of 1942. He was in a camp. He wrote a book called "If This Is a Man." I actually have his Holocaust number tattooed on my arm. I got that. I'm not going to tell you when and where I got that. That's a bit of a story in itself. My mom's not going to be too proud of that. Yeah, he'd be one. Like you know, you got to keep yourself sane, and people do that by different means. And like, you know, I've read a handful of books, and I think I really like embodied stoicism. I don't like the Stoics cookbook for the 21st century written by some cunt who lives on a farm. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, I don't need some translation of Marcus Aurelius Meditations. Like, give me someone who exemplified, you know, Stoic behaviors and like what could arguably be like the most horrendous living conditions that someone could still be alive in. So I like that book. I like a lot. And so by extension of that, I think he'd be a super interesting guy because he was kind of spiteful too. Like, he was a chemical engineer that worked in a paint factory. He's an Italian Jew. And then after, and he writes about this, after the war, he went back to work, and a lot of his work ended up in Germany. And he would go into these meetings in Germany and he would deliberately roll up his sleeves so they saw the tattoo of his number on his arm. So I was like, oh, fuck, so I got that one thrown on me in Amsterdam a few years ago. So he's one. I would say number two, and maybe I'll just keep it at this, would be David Blaine. Because I think everything we do is some sort of sleight of hand. And I just love that his ability to throw attention, I think, is so interesting to me. Like, yeah, I would say he'd be someone that, like, you know, you want to believe in magic, and he'd be the guy that makes you do it. So I find him very interesting. I've listened to a lot of his stuff, a podcast and anything like that. Actually, oddly enough, this is so strange. Him and I have the same tattoo, and I found this out after. His favorite author is Primo Levi. So I think that's what solidified it for me, because like I forget what someone told me that. Someone was like, you have the same tattoo as what's that?
Maybe the three of you could have dinner together.
That would be wild. I don't think we're going to the same place. If there's an eternal dinner reservation in the sky, I think Mr. Blaine and Primo may have punched their seats. I will see you in the underworld. Yeah, no, that's so funny. Someone told me that not too long ago. They saw, I think I was traveling. I was sitting next to a guy on a plane. He goes, why do you have the same tattoo as David Blaine? And I was like, huh? And then I looked down and I was like, that? I was like, oh, that's this author's Auschwitz number. And he's like, oh, okay. I didn't know that's why David Blaine have it, but that's what that is. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, neat. So yeah, that would be a cool little round table. Let's see if we can.
Is it the same number?
Yeah, it's his prison number.
Yeah.
So David Blaine's favorite author, I guess, is Primo Levi, and he has, he's got it tattooed on his arm too.
Wild.
Yeah, that is wild.
Shout out David Blaine. What up?
Shout out David Blaine.
I'll pay the bill
for dinner.
Yeah. I'm sure he got it. I'm sure he's doing okay.
I'll cut this up and send it to him.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
So, in everything that you've kind of said today, I feel like a lot of kind of what you've been through and your experiences have come from you servicing others and helping other people, and then that's then created opportunities for yourself. So I guess I'd be really interested in hearing how you kind of find that balance between personal fulfillment and doing things for the greater good.
Yeah, I don't know, greater good, that's tough. I'm not out here curing cancer or anything. Others, no, I think they're one and the same, right? Like I don't know. I get a kick out of it, and now I get to get a kick out of it and not sleep in the car. So it's just it's purely self-serving. Like there's no such thing as altruism. I think if it feels good, you're just doing it because for one benefit or the other. I like traveling, or I like helping people. Like, does the intention really matter at the end of the day? If people get helped, then I don't know. Like, I do it for me. Like, I enjoy kind of the mental jousting matches of discussing things in our industry that I find interesting. I like going to the gym every day and kind of like well, this guy said this and this guy said that, and I'm going to do it that way. Well, what's his? It's really just problems. Again, it's the byproduct of being a plow horse. It's like, can I pull it? Can I push it? Can I run through it? And it's just sort of that. It offers sort of like an endless array of challenges, which, like, at the end of the day, that's kind of like, I'm just peeling at this mental fucking paint chip on a door every day. I just wake up and I just fixate on this thing, and I don't know, that fixation has found me kind of well. So yeah, I mean, I don't ever see it as that. Like, I don't ever see it as like, as necessarily like helping. Who knows? Maybe it's harmful to people. But I just don't hear those reviews because they're not in the industry anymore. But yeah, it's to me, it's just like it lets me think. Like, it just, I guess
it's definitely harmful to boomers. I think
Sure.
everyone else is. I think it's probably a net positive to everyone else.
And I will be harmful to boomers. You better ruck on, my friends. You better ruck on to a very safe place where I can't find you. Yeah, no, it's just, I think for me, it lets me think. Like, I think out loud, and that's really what the courses have become. It's just like, I don't know, I get to tell some stories, and I get to share stuff that I've done and do it in a way that just lets me really kind of, I think it lets me think. And that's why I like teaching stuff live. And even if it's live online, it's like, well, I still am working things out. And, I think that's where some of the value might come from, is like, you're watching a guy try to find an answer rather than just listening to a guy giving you an answer. So it's like, hopefully the thought process and kind of this idea of like, all right, we'll show your work. Maybe that's what comes throughout all the noise. So yeah, it's never like a prefrontal thought of deliberate, how do I find a balance? It's just, I just think stuff, and I probably am saying most of it before I've thought about it. And then I think about it in real time as it passes through the teleprompter on the inside of my eyes. And I go, yeah, sure, that checks out. But yeah, it's an interesting question. Nothing I do is deliberate. I'm just like a dog chasing cars at this point.
Perfect.
So obviously, Nick and I sort of mentioned the impact that you've had on us and how we very much admire you and sort of appreciate everything you've done. Is there someone that has played that role in your life for you?
Interesting. I'm a pretty spiteful person, I think. I don't know, probably my folks. My sister. And I mean, you come across people. I think it's definitely a depth over distance thing. I think, you and us, like Benny, we could on one hand, we could list a number of times we've been in the same room together over the last 7 years. But if I was ever in a bad way, I'd be fucking calling your ass. So, put your phone on silent or something. I think to a large degree, I mean, there's everyone and anyone, if you're going to get like metaphysical butterfly effect on it, I think like, every person who's asked a good question, or every person that's, took a chance on some kid to come talk at his gym. It's like, I don't know if one holds, like, you can quantify things and be like, well, I was on this podcast and they blew me up, blah, 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 blah. Like, and that's a pretty easy thing to measure. But, I think there's like, everything we've done has some inflection point, and I don't think good and bad. And I think an ethos that I adopted quite early was like, nothing is ever as good as I think it's going to be, and nothing's ever as bad as I think it's going to be either. Right? Like, I was a kid out of school destined to put fucking 4 screws into a door of a minivan 4 years ago, and then all of a sudden it's like, I'm a chiropractor at the largest liquid asset company on the planet. I was like, well, people are going to recognize that forever. And I was like, well, that's nuts. This will skyrocket me. And I just like skyrocket me to the big and tall store to buy fucking chinos that fit. And I got to buy loafers and wear glasses like a dickhead. Like, sorry, Nick, I look like a dickhead with glasses on. But it's right. There you go. So for me, it was just kind of like, and then I got the Stanford job. I'm like, oh, this will put me on the map. Stanford University, it's basically an Ivy League school. What a reputation. And I was like, you're not in the linear accelerator, dude. Like, you're in the weight room, relax. And then, like I got a seminar here. I got invited to speak at this thing. And after a while, it's like you just sort of approach everything with this cautious optimism, and bad things the same. right? You have if something gets canceled or something doesn't go well or fucking, Yemen starts firing missiles at the UN. Oh, we got to cancel that event. Like, fuck, okay. And it's just like, oh, whatever. So you kind of just, it tempers you over time. And I guess it's jaded. And, is there a single person? It's like, no, probably not. But there's a ton, I think. And that's probably even more important is like, I think some people can be catalyzed by one or two people with a big name. And it's like, maybe you haven't earned that. Maybe what you need is a collective voice of, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 people, how fucking many people I've been up in front of and started yammering away on. And that's just in real life, let alone on the internet. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, I think I'm pretty good with names and faces. And I could probably recall more people that I've spoken in front of than not. So that's probably it. I don't think there's one that stands out. I think this is really more of a byproduct of like, maybe 10, 20,000 people going, yeah, he's all right.
Yeah, I think that really shines through in the Pre-Script community that you've built, though, is, what I've found being a part of it is it really reminds me of the team environment from my footy days. Is like, I really missed that for a really long time. And you guys have created that through the internet, bridging companies and industries and everything. And it feels like a team environment where everyone just wants the best for everyone else. And everyone's there to help and support. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it runs a similar course because like everyone kind of has this like ill-defined arbitrary tryout period that the company has not formalized in any documents at all. It's like, this motherfucker's still talking? I don't know. Give him a shirt. Like Baxter's one that comes to mind where he's just like, man, this kid won't shut the fuck up in this lab. What do we do with him? Like, to see if he wants a job, I guess. I don't know. What are we supposed to do with him? So yeah, I mean, by that token, I mean, I think the team environment's a good way to look at it because we have a lot of different role players. I don't think we have many people who are very similar to one another. We all respect what everyone does in and outside the community, and then everyone brings something a little bit unique to the table, and everyone's earned their stripes in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, look, this one, I love this question. So what we're doing is with every guest, towards the end of the episode, they get the opportunity to ask the next guest a question.
Oh God!
The previous guest doesn't know who the following guest is. Following guest doesn't know who the previous guest is. You just get the question, then you get to answer it, and then you get to ask the next guest one. So
I like it.
Our previous guest, I will give you a hint. He's an extremely high-level powerlifter. He's going to be released after you, so if you're interested, you'll see it coming out next week. His question to you was, do you wear a squat plug, and what color is it?
Sorry, I don't know what that is.
That's what they all say. That's what they all say.
This is probably some Australian thing that I don't get. And I can't tell you this, I can't say this vehemently enough. I'm no longer a powerlifter. So I don't even know when the last time I squatted was. So I'm going to say whatever color, who could this be? So a high level powerlifter would ask that question. Australian or not? I'm going to do a little bit of guess who here.
Lives in Australia.
Yeah.
Lives in Australia. So not Australian, but lives in Australia. So Crozier's out, Bass is out. Is Gwaine Johnson? Was it Gwaine? I don't know. So I honestly don't know what that is. I could Google search it, but based off your facial expression.
Google search it.
I'm gonna have to clear my search history. So I'm sorry. I made a mockery of the question. So I guess, do I just go on and ask my question to the next person?
Yeah, ask your question to the next person.
And I have no clue as to who the next person's going to be.
No.
What's one that I like? It's fairly generic. Okay, I like this. Tim Ferriss used to ask this question. I always thought it was interesting. If you could put one thing on a billboard anywhere in the world, where would it be and what would it be?
Oh, nice.
Smarter man than I, Tim Ferriss.
Go ahead and answer your own question.
A cop hides here, under some overpass where a cop hides for the speeding or some shit, right? Like that would be the best one ever. Thanks.
It'd be even better if you put it somewhere where there wasn't a cop and you just stood there with a coffee and just watched everyone slam their brakes on.
Yeah, you're still doing the world a service.
Yeah. You got anything else, Nick?
No, I was going to let you finish up with the last one, and we'll call it there.
So, obviously, one of the things you sort of spoke about was sort of just saying yes and rolling with the opportunities. But if you kind of had to distill your experiences into a single piece of advice for someone, what would it be?
A single piece of advice. That's tough. That can come in like many forms. I mean, the back of the quip is usually like, and the software, the roboticist guy always accused me of this, of like move fast and break shit. But I feel like that's not good advice on the whole. I don't know. I think like practical advice would be have a really good on like the backs of that might be more useful. And I think like the more I've gone through, the more like having a system and how you make decisions is super useful, because I think that's what a lot of people lack. Like I put up something the other day that like inaction and reaction are both signs of weakness. So like I know people who aren't in good places because they're constantly reacting to things. I know people who aren't in good places because they can't make a fucking decision. It's like a reaction and inaction are both devoid of critical thinking, right? So like you want to be able to move fast, but you don't want to react, right? Like, you know, there's some emails that I left in draft to some people that are like nasty. I used to send them to my assistant. You motherfucker, blah, 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 blah. And I would just send it to her. And she would go, okay, we'll try this again tomorrow. So I think anyone should have a framework for decision making that holds them accountable, because I think that's where I see a lot of people, you know, either making poor decisions by reacting or making the choice to enact and not do anything, which is still an action in itself. So I think that for me has been super useful, is like when opportunities are coming at like a high pitch, because I say no to stuff. Like if it's with someone that I rate as just a fuckhead, like see you later. Like there's no amount of eyeballs or money that could put me on a stage with someone that I just don't like. So I think getting really clear on a framework for decision making, that usually entails like, you know, understand your values to a certain degree, which might be a better starting point for people. But like, if you haven't figured those out, use that as an opportunity of like, okay, how do you make decisions? Like what is your go-to process, and make it iterable, make it something that's malleable, that can change and improve on itself over time. But like, I think there's such a value of going like, if I go through this process and my answer is this is the thing we stick with. Like, so you negotiate with yourself, like, you know, you commit to these terms. And then if you go through the process and you realize on the other end that decision was shit, you need to not regret your answer. You need to fix your system. Right. And I think that's where a lot of people fall short, is they don't think about how they think, or in some cases they don't think at all. So I think when it comes to kind of like, you know, a lot of what we talked about today, a lot of it has just become a byproduct of having a system of making decisions. And then, you know, I think especially as people try and, you know, ascend through whatever part of their life that they're trying to ascend through, whether it's relationships, whether it's business, whether it's a particular sport, it's like, understand that leadership is more about taking the blame than taking the credit. So it's like, you know, you make a decision because a lot of times most people won't, and it's going to be wrong, probably more often than it's right. But if you can kind of stay steadfast while the shit rains down on you, and you're like, oh, okay, it's not that bad. Like, okay, well, what happened? He's mad. All right, whatever. Okay, we'll find a better system. So I think that's something that I find as I talk to people more and more, that's what they lack, is they actually lack a consistent system that holds them accountable to make decisions. And I think when you have that, you can start making better decisions faster.
Yeah. And you mentioned having a system and values as being part of that process. And that's something that Ben and I speak to each other a lot, quite a bit, is what our values are and how we kind of run our decisions through our values. And I'd be super interested to hear what your values are that you use as guiding principles in the decisions that you make.
Yeah. So my decision's made off the heart, head, and the gut. We take it to a trial. And we best 2 out of 3 wins, and we figure out why one's not aligned with the other. And the values are loyalty, honesty, respect, integrity, trust. easy, done. But like those are, once you get those kind of like rolling off the tip of your tongue, then it's like, okay, how do we put these into a system? It's like, let's think about it on paper. All right, how does it look? That's the head. Heart is like, what do I really want to do? And then the gut is like, what was the first thing I thought about? And then was that a yes or a no? And then I think having that system of making decisions, because there are going to be things where like you're going to be in conflict with yourself. That's what stems in, oh my God, should I get sushi or should I get pad thai? It's like, dog, you know what? You know who doesn't care about that? Homeboy that's living in the fucking back of the Corsica or whatever, right? Like, so it's, I think having that decision-making framework and whatever that chooses to be. Some people like just follow your heart. It's like, yeah, okay, sure. Whatever. You might find yourself in the back of the Corsica again, but like you maybe we want a few dimensions to this decision-making process. But yeah, that would be my advice. That's my system, and that's my advice is to get a system. And fuck, use mine if you want. I got it from someone who realized how fucked up I was. So yeah.
Perfect. I think that's a really good place to end, man. And I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on and have a chat with us today.
Oh, always.
And,
thank you
for having
me.
me. Yeah, dude.
Do it
Pleasure.
again
Hopefully, hope we can run this back in real life at some point this year. Get you guys over to this side of the world.
Yeah, that'd be great. So just before we finish up, where can everyone find you?
Instagram's probably the easiest, at @the_muscle_doc. All the education stuff's online, www.pre-script.com, and use podcast is on Spotify and YouTube, RX'd Radio.
Yep. I suggest everyone go and have a listen. There's how many episodes now? Hundreds.
Almost 500. Yeah, we've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, and they're fantastic. So I'm gonna end it there. Thank you so much.
Cheers, gents.
See you guys.